Oh, we'll just wait another minute before we start. Yeah, I'm glad you're recording because I know that because people were having trouble with registering, that there's some people who likely wanted to be here but couldn't make it. So it'll be nice to be able to offer the recording. So,
Erin, good to see you on.
Hi, Beth. It's Cynthia from New York.
oh, hey, Cynthia. Oh, and Pat's
Yeah.
here, and Cindy Mundell. Oh, fun to see you. And Sharon's from California. It's really, there's something about a Zoom event or it's just this national gathering. Oh, it's really fun to see you, Cynthia. Hey, and here's Heather.
So I wanted to say congratulations, Beth, on your wonderful review, and the fact that you're re-releasing Swinging on a Garden Gate is great. I'm very happy.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Thanks for being here. Well, maybe we should go ahead and get started because it's a little after 7. We may have people still joining us, but I want to extend a warm welcome to everyone and big thanks for taking an hour back on the computer to be part of this. And also a big thanks to Skinner House Books for co-sponsoring this event and also for re-releasing Swinging on the Garden Gate after 22 years. It's pretty remarkable that 22 years later, I still got to work with the same editor at Skinner House, and what a treat that is. And then also a big thanks to Wisdom Ways for hosting it and Danielle for being here as our Zoom master. And then I'm also really excited to welcome Karen Oliveto, who has been in my life for a very long time, although we very rarely cross paths. But Karen is currently a United Methodist Church bishop in the Rocky Mountain and Yellowstone Conference. She's been a bishop since 2016, and before that was a UMC pastor who actually served, oddly enough, at my partner's home church in Berkeley. So yeah, it's really been a treat to work with her on this book because she wrote a foreword for the re-release, and so I'm really grateful to her for that and for being part of a conversation tonight in celebration of the re-release. For those who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Jared Andrew, and I am in Minneapolis with my partner and 13-year-old daughter and 2 cats. And I'm the author of a number of books, a couple books on writing, one called Writing the Sacred Journey, The Art and Practice of Spiritual Memoir, and another on revision called Living Revision. And then also a collection of personal essays and a novel that's called Hannah Delivered. And now the Swinging on the Garden Gate, the memoir, is out again. So what I thought we would do tonight is open with a little meditation, and then Karen and I are going to be in conversation. We'll have a little bit of time toward the end for questions and answers, and a little reading to close us. So it'll be a quick dip into the book and conversation. So just by way of bringing us together and into this time and place, I thought I would read a little bit of the preface to the book, just a snippet, and then we'll just take a few breaths afterwards. Coming out in any form cracks the world open. When we come out, we take a buried truth, an inward reality residing near the soul, and pull it to the surface where it wreaks havoc on every perpetuated falsehood. We yank a piece of our essence out into the air, transforming in the process the self we thought we were as well as the community around us. I want to just start with that little passage because while this is a book about coming out bisexual, I really do think that we're all called to come out. We're all called to take the truths that are buried inside us and bring them to the surface, integrate them into our life. And that's in some ways the spiritual journey. So, so I hope that wider understanding of coming out is kind of an umbrella that we can all live under and emerge under as kind of a practice in our lives. So I thought that just by way of starting, we would contextualize this re-release by kind of thinking back to the year 2000 when it first came out, and actually the 6 years prior to it when I was writing the book, and just reflect on like what's happened in the last 22 years. So Karen, I'm wondering if you would be willing to start and just kind of reflect on where we are at with GLBT rights and the relationship between the queer community and the church, and kind of give us a big picture.
Thanks. And first, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I just loved your book. I tell everybody it's one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read. And just thank you for naming your truth and inviting all of us to name our own. So, it's interesting. So 2000 really started that 6 years previous, but that's almost, when you think about Stonewall 69 to the 90s to 2022, it's almost the midpoint of that place where you started. And yet it was still the love that dare not speak its name, right? LGBTQ love and lives. There was this movement around coming out. Certainly AIDS impacted that, right? And suddenly you couldn't hide in the closet anymore. So many of the men in our world. But really, to me, and I served in San Francisco from 1989 until 2016 when I was elected bishop, and seeing, being at the epicenter of the AIDS epidemic, and then, Gavin Newsom allowing the city clerk to do marriage certificates, to then going to the Supreme Court. And then, did you and I ever think marriage was a possibility?
Yeah.
No. But how that instantly changed, I think, and this, I'm a sociologist by background. The straight world understands marriage. I'll never forget, my mother. I had been with my partner for 10 years before marriage became legal. And when we told my mother we were going to get married, she got all giddy. And she's like, I never thought I'd have a daughter-in-law. Well, as Robin says, what was I before? Chopped liver. But suddenly our lives, there was a reference point straight people could put in our lives that I think is really significant. And so to be in this current era where there's this pushback on marriage, on trans rights, on telling the story of our lives. We are at a critical moment, I think.
Yeah.
That was like a jog. No, that was like a marathon through like 60 years of queer history.
Hop, skip, and jump, but it was just right to contextualize it. And that's exactly right. When the 20th anniversary of the release came around, I was just reflecting on the story, having written my story and the work that I saw it doing in readers' lives, and particularly the young people who came to me. I always will remember this one college student who came to me with like her copy of Swinging that had been dog-eared and underlined and highlighted, and it looked like a truck had run over it. And she asked me to sign it. And I actually got to know her fairly well, and it was like her guidebook to seminary. Actually, she was Catholic. She left the Catholic Church. She joined the Protestant Church. She went to seminary. Like she wanted to be a pastor, and just knowing that one kind of ordinary coming out story that wrestled with faith could provide that map for someone was so significant to me. So I was reflecting back on those sorts of encounters that I had, and how of all the writing that I've done, Swinging on the Garden Gate has served that role in people's lives, kind of the lifesaver role that I had wanted for myself. And I was not willing to, it had been out of print for over 10 years, 15 years almost. And I was like, I don't want to let this go. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to reprint it myself. But before I did, I went to Skinner House and I said, any chance that you're interested? And they said, yes, thank goodness. And I think it's exactly because of, this backlash, the threat to the rights that we've gained, and the kind of tension around storytelling, naming our identity. But also, I, in some ways, think that the book is more needed today than it was before, because the worlds that it bridges, the world of faith and the world of the GLBT community seem even more separate, even though there are these certainly reconciling congregations where it's safe to be out and all. But I guess maybe what I should say is the world of spirituality and living a life of in relationship to mystery and relationship to meaning, and having that sense of deep connection between our spirit and our body, that seems even more alien today than it did then for some reason. It seems like the divide has widened. And the moment that crystallized that for me was I was invited to do a series of readings at two-year colleges in Wisconsin. And in multiple places, I was asked multiple times, wait a minute, is it really possible to be gay and Christian?
Right.
Or the one that really got me, is it really possible to be queer and spiritual? And so it was almost like those two things reside in completely different camps. And I wanted to say yes. And in fact, we all are spiritual beings, and in fact, our sexuality, regardless of what it is one of the primary ways that we know our spirit, in terms of its energy and its color and its how it shapes us. And so anyhow, I just felt so compelled to testify.
Right.
And so that was really the impetus behind.
So I have a question though. I mean, it's interesting that this part of your story, right? This was a story from 22 years ago, right? A part of your story. It feels as relevant now as it did 22 years ago. However, the social lens is different.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The social lens is very different. And I was hesitant in some ways to put it out again, because in many ways, my consciousness is quite different, just in terms of, understanding it's just my immense privilege and how that colored my story in many ways unconsciously. And so I would not write the story in the same way today. But I also know the truth of the story. And I think what allows it to speak, even in, for instance, my God language, my theology has changed. Certainly my consciousness about race and privilege and culture, have changed dramatically. But I think where the story speaks to me and where I hope it speaks to others beyond just my little demographic is that our identities are ultimately sourced beyond our bodies. And I think about my true identity as being sourced in the great I am, and it's a shared identity. People are, a person is a person through other persons, and also we're a shared, beyond our lifespan, we're a shared spirit. And much of my story, I think, is about identifying my unique individual flavor of that, and through that, opening a lens onto that sacred unified self.
Yeah.
And each of us is this unique lens, and in a way what we desperately need is a multiplicity of these lenses onto that sacred shared divine self.
And that's what's so frightening about this moment we're living in, because there, at a time when we thought, oh my gosh, we're widening the stories that are being told, and listen to the particularity, but also the way to have empathy and identify our shared humanity as well as our shared divinity. There's this narrowing again and cutting out of what's acceptable, and I think it's really dangerous. I think it's impacting us in critical ways in terms of a community, a country, a world. So I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, which is where, when in your opening statements you talked about the beautiful, the necessity of sharing stories, and I definitely think our stories are sacred, and that we desperately need many, many sacred stories, because it's like, each story is a little facet of
Of a larger picture.
Of a much larger picture.
And
we'll
it's so
never get that
beautiful.
large picture without the multiplicity of stories.
And it's and the so many seek to shut down stories. I know being an openly lesbian bishop in the United Methodist Church, and going into communities that have never seen an openly lesbian married bishop, they already know a part of my story, and there's an authentic self I bring into that space. But what's amazing is it helps others be their own authentic self. And that's what I think the importance of coming out is, I think. And that's, your story encourages all of us to find what our own unique story is, and to tell it.
Yeah. And to continue discovering it and living into it, that it's not a static identity, but our identity is kind of fathomless, and we get to keep digging. It's actually, one of another scary dimension today is, I think, there's a propensity for people to latch on to identity and defend it so ardently that that then we forget that that's any identity that we latch onto is just one part of us, and that there's always more to discover, and there's contrary identities that we inhabit, and so
yeah
yeah.
So, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What do I think? I had.
So let's talk, we're talking about coming out, and what is the role of community in coming out?
Yes. Well, and that's also where I am so privileged and blessed. And one of the ways that the church actually worked well in my instance, because I first heard the word bisexual in an adult ed at church.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And it was in a positive way, because the church was reconciling, welcoming of gays and lesbians, but they were wondering, should we be welcoming of bisexuals and transgender folks? And it's I probably had heard the word bisexual before, but it was the first time I met a real one that I was aware of. And so I went to this panel discussion, and I was like, that's me. This is it. This is a description of my reality. And the fact that I had that experience in church is just so tremendous. So in some ways, that's, it's the fact of my faith community embracing me. I actually, another funny story that I don't think is in Swinging on the Garden Gate, but the day that I decided that I was going to come out at church during Joys and Concerns, there was a friend of mine, actually you would have known her. Do you remember Jean Audrey Powers?
Oh my gosh. Taught every young queer person how to drink a martini.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
If you can't kiss it, you have to send it back.
Right.
Send it back.
Gotta be the convex.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So anyhow, Jean Audrey was a legend in the United Methodist
Church.
Now
that you went to Prospect Park.
Yes.
That's where Robin went.
Oh,
my spouse.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, the connections continue.
It's really wild.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that morning I was just so nervous. I was going to come out during Joys and Concerns, and I was just shaking about it, and just about ready to raise my hand for the microphone when Jean Audrey, who had just had a mastectomy for her breast cancer, stood up and she said, I just want to thank God for my body. And then she proceeds to like feel herself. Like, I love my new body without my breast. And I thought, wow, if my church can handle her.
Yeah,
exactly. So all that's to say, what a beautiful, welcoming, nurturing environment I was able to come out within. And so in some ways that I think compelled me to write my story, because I've been fairly safe with my story for my entire life. And so if ever there was, sometimes people say, how did you muster up the courage to share so wildly? And it's like, I've been so privileged, and I have been very safe. And so it's even more important for me to make my story available. But back to community, it's, there's this, I think that there's two factors that really allowed, well, I should say three places that really allowed for the depth of reflection that I needed, and the invitation that I needed to both to come out, but to come out with this depth of reflection, this come out in such a thorough way. And the first one was writing, just the intimacy of the page and having that deep privacy was critical to the listening that I think is essential for not just coming out about your sexual identity, but coming out about who you are and what your true nature is. Spiritual direction was the second thing. So that kind of a personified listening ear, the personified God's presence So that long-term relationship I had with a spiritual director who really could hear and hold my story. And then the third was the church, and how not only did they teach me about bisexuality and receive me, but also was kind of an extension, an activist extension into the world, and a magnifier for me, and also, it's the people we could march in the parade with, the Pride Parade, and so that I always felt that my small story was connected to a much bigger story. And then when my mother, at first my mother was really terrified and very upset, and had a hard time coming out herself about it. But once she went through that process, she actually became more of an activist than me, and worked a lot in the United Methodist Church. So all of that was, just this tremendous community that held me. And I honestly, that's why I today am absolutely committed to the church, because I am a firm believer in community, and that we need to be there for one another in order to be most fully ourselves.
Right. I think the hardest thing for me, I love that as a child, the church wrapped me up in an understanding that God loves me unconditionally and accepts me unconditionally. I just am so grateful, because when I came out, I had no doubt about God, right?
Right.
And it's interesting because I had always had this very close relationship with God until I went to seminary, which, when do people come out? When they go to seminary, but I started wrestling with, this is the voice in me that I didn't quite understand, have the language for. And I wrestled that first year of seminary, and it was the first time in my life that God was silent. And it's like, what? Here I am in seminary, and dealing with my sexuality, and where is God in this? And it was as soon as I was able to say, I'm a lesbian, that I know that for the peace that passes understanding fell upon me.
Yeah.
And I realized God didn't leave me. I left God because I wasn't claiming who I was created to be. But then I had to deal with the church, meaning the larger church, that had lied to me, or that had lied about their own commitment to that God who loves me unconditionally, right? Because suddenly the church put conditions on me. So I'm grateful for local churches that continue to hold that, and let people know that the coming out journey, whatever it is that we need to come out about in order to be whole, those churches are there to hold that sacred story, because it is a source of healing, not just for the individual, but for the community.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We need people to come out in all forms, right? We need people to live authentic lives, and
Right.
to be most fully themselves and very present, because in fact, that's kind of another way to understand not coming out, is not being fully present. And we can only be in real relationship with each other, and we can only be in real healthy relationship with the earth, and certainly with the creator, if we show up.
Right. And that's where I think it's time for the church to recapture giving testimony, right? Letting people stand up and talk about, here's how and where I encounter God. Here is the truth of my life. We're afraid to open that door, but what is it we fear? Is it the fear of our own authenticity that we don't know how to express?
Well, and it's also democratizing of scripture too, isn't it?
Ooh, you mean everybody? And you mean scripture talks to everybody and everybody can enter into it? What? Now you're going too far, Elizabeth. You're going too far.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a really old Christian idea, isn't it? That creation is the first scripture and then the holy book is the second, right?
Yes.
So we are the first scripture, and our bodies are holy, and when we like really inhabit them and attend to them, listen, understand the truth that they're telling, understand the truth of our experience, like that, there's wisdom in there.
So part of your book, you talk about the process of creation as a spiritual act, right? And are there boundaries to that? Talk about that. Talk about because you note the God who creates. Talk about the self who creates. So talk about that as a spiritual act. And are there containers to that or not?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what you mean by containers. You mean like limitations to that?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, just checking.
No, I'm convinced that any sort of creative practice is also a spiritual practice if we attend to it in an open-hearted, honest way. So actually right now I'm in the process of starting an organization that is using art making as an entry point into contemplative practice. And so there's something really inclusive and accessible about art that allows people to experience transformation. I mean, that's just a little bit of background. The whole book, Living Revision, is how revision is a transformational practice, and that if we want our text to grow, to evolve, and to be developed into a publishable book or literary art, that we have to grow as well. Like we have to open ourselves to transformation. So I think that's true of any artistic practice. And so really what's being created whenever we create something is two things. We're creating the work of art, but we're also creating ourselves. And to me, the work of creating ourselves is the ultimate creation, right? That we get to not be passive. We don't have to be passive participants in creation. Like we get to make choices about the world that we're creating. We get to make choices about who we're becoming. And there's something about doing an artistic practice that reveals that. So I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, that's helpful.
I'm passionate about creating as a spiritual practice. Yeah.
So the other thing that's interesting about church is it's one of the few social places where we live in an intergenerational community.
Yeah.
So much of the world, families don't even eat together so often. And so the role of children to teach us about God, what would you say? Because you bring out the child in you, who was very much connected to God and had so many lessons and wisdom and insight. So talk about that a little.
Yeah. Well, kids know how to play, and I think a dimension of God's nature that we very serious Christians tend to overlook is the playful God who's creating out of joy as opposed to with purpose or so that to me is, and also kids are very naturally genuine. They're naturally present. So the passage that is one of my favorites in Swinging on the Garden Gate is when toward the end of the book, I describe playing cat's cradle with my sister in the back. We did lots of road trips and we would play cat's cradle and it's such a beautiful form of play, right? It's totally worthless. I just like do something with my hands and I pass it to you and you do something, you know, but you need each other in order to hold the strings and the patterns repeat, but they're always kind of surprising. And that game really speaks to me as a metaphor for how our stories intersect, you know, that I tell you my story and you kind of take this and that from it and you make it into something for yourself that I'll never know how you interpret the story or what it means to you or what pieces speak to you. So you make something different of it. And ideally you take something from that experience and make something of it and pass it on to someone else. So I you know, with my own daughter, I never fail to find some beautiful wisdom in something very simple. I'm with you that intergenerational experience that church communities allow is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important for us older people. It's so important for the kids who are also kind of siloed in age groups and yeah. Well, gosh, time is flying. I wonder if anyone wants to jump in with a question or comment that for either of us. It's kind of a great opportunity to be in conversation. So does anyone want to jump in? Let's see here.
I love that, Pat. I'm a 75-year-old kid. I enjoy every new experience and enjoy it as a child would. I think God intended us to. Amen, Pat. Amen.
And I can vouch for Pat. She is a good player.
I saw Heather had a hand up, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering in thinking of doing the re-release, what was the hardest part about re-releasing it? And you may have addressed some of this already. And then what was the most rewarding?
The hardest part about re-releasing it was taking it through the equity review, where there was just a lot of dated elements of the story that I really had to wrangle with. That was hard, because you're always attached to your earlier drafts. So in terms of the nicest thing, I'm still living into the release. It's not quite totally done, but it's certainly been the easiest book to re-release because, with any new book, there's the trepidation of like, oh my gosh, how is this going to land? Well, this one I know how it lands. So that's been really easy and fun. And then I will say that the US Catholic reviewed it, and the reviewer of that, the reviewer, that review was about the closest to a love letter I've ever experienced.
Wow.
And that was just really kind of amazing and gratifying, to get that from a Catholic publication. It was just
wow,
such a treat.
Vicki, I see a hand up. Vicki.
Can you unmute, Vicki?
I'm reminded as I listen to you, Bishop, that sometimes a lot of times in our coming out, that we encourage people even when we don't know that we do. And you're one of my heroes. I'm a lifelong United Methodist. I grew up in the Florida Conference with all that that means. And I dreamed of being a ordained Methodist minister there. And I was ordained. And then it came out that I was gay, and I had to exit stage left. And went through a very dark period, and became a social worker, and tried to live up my call, the best as I could within that. And now I'm in the Oregon, Idaho conference, and I feel like Rumpelstiltskin, finding out that going back out here where it's mandated that you're gay, pretty much, and looking at being a deacon.
Wow.
So I was very much aware of your process in 2016. I knew some of the ministers that were there that elected you, and they told me what that process was like, and all of that. And I read both of your books, and just means a lot.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you very much. And blessings on your journey home.
Thank you.
I'm thinking back to the bit that you shared, Karen, about how the coming out was critical to your faith journey. And I think that's something that we need to hear a lot. Even though that's central in my book, it was really helpful to hear you say that again. I think because I think it's really back to storytelling that we in the United Methodist Church, we Protestants, or maybe it's we liberal I don't know, but we don't give testimonials, and we don't share how we grow in faith. And I'm hungry for that. How do we grow in faith?
Right. And I get my share of people who aren't happy with me being a bishop. Although, I mean, the multitude of letters are thank yous and celebrating, but the ones that are angry, the ones that are offended, I write back and I say, I always ask, you don't know anything about me. And I don't know you. So here's a little bit of my story. And I want to know about you. When did the church help you fall in love with Jesus? How has it helped you know God? And how does it help you be in community with others? I want to know, I want to know those stories, even from the people who are angriest at me. Because if I don't want to know their stories, why should I expect them to know mine or want to know mine?
Right. But it's that real experience of faith, and that it's because it's so absent from our tradition. I think we've forgotten how important it is, to continue to attend to how we're growing or in relationship with God, with meaning, with purpose, with the natural world, how we're in relationship with God, and how we're continuing to grow and change in that relationship.
Yeah, when I work with groups, on retreats, one of the first exercises, I always love having them do life maps, do your life map. But I love it because I get to revisit how I tell my journey and how I tell my story. And it changes over time, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, we have a story to tell, but there are some things that come forward There's some things that don't mean the same anymore. And so I love doing that exercise with whenever I'm invited to lead a retreat, because I get to look at my story again.
Yeah, I had a teacher once who described it being like a lighthouse, and there's a spiral staircase going up the inside of the lighthouse, and every memory is like a mural painted up the inside of the lighthouse. And so, you know, as you're going through life, you're going round and round past these memories over and over again. But with every spiral, you have a different perspective on those memories. And so it's really a different vantage on what they might mean, and so, you know, in that way, our experiences are endlessly revelatory, right?
Yes.
They're like good books that you can reread and reread and still get something out of them. And isn't that amazing? I mean, that's
Yes.
that dynamic scriptural quality of our life experience, that it's worth paying attention to. It's worth asking, you know, being inquisitive about. And
so how do you encourage people to tell their stories or to get in touch with their stories?
well, you know, I teach memoir. That's it. I'm constantly teaching memoir writing. But more and more, I am teaching memoir writing as spiritual practice. So I am constantly creating writing prompts, and and contextualizing working with memory as not avoiding the present or as being sentimental, but that the memory is constantly shaping who we are. It's constantly speaking to us. And so to be an intentional dialogue with memories makes them a beautiful resource for us, and a beautiful way to listen to the Spirit at work in our lives. So yeah, I mean, I'm really privileged to be able to have the writing teacher hat that I primarily wear, and create opportunities, which I think of as worshipful opportunities. I mean, I'm like, one of my favorite things to do is to be in a big classroom of people and offer a writing prompt, and then have that period of silence. And everyone is like in this sweet, quiet state between them and their page. And I just sit there, and I don't write. I pretend to write sometimes. I just do the little squeals, and I just hold that silence, because it's prayerful to me.
Yeah.
To have that, to be able to share that with a group. So yeah, that I get to create spaces like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I can see everybody at the same time. So yeah, well, Pat, did you want to say something?
All I wanted to say was how much I've enjoyed the dialogue between the two of you. And of course, how many memories have been floating through my head, Beth, with your comments and things, and different people that I've been holding in my heart because of, well, especially one, when people have talked about trying to become pastors in the Methodist Church. And I specifically think of one person who was almost destroyed by her experience. And I've lost touch with her now, and I'm very upset about that because she is a wonderful person and would have been an outstanding pastor. And I always look at and feel and know in my heart that we are all God's children, and the ones who are able to get out there and spread the word of Jesus, who was the all accepting individual who taught us love and all of these wonderful attributes that if we could just try to emulate, just even try, this world would be such a much better place. And to squelch anyone who has that gift and not allow them to get out there and be with people and teach them and lead them in a Christ lived life is unthinkable. And Beth, I think that your writing has enabled people to take a second look at themselves, whether it be because they're homosexual or because they're they have other hang-ups in their life that they're keeping to themselves, rather than sharing who they are and expressing themselves. I just think it's a wonderful thing that you've done, Beth, in the writing of this book and the re-releasing of this book, to let people be who they are. And no matter what inside thing that they think is not good about themselves, if they bring it to the forefront and deal with it, it's just can be such a positive thing. I have inside of me things, my lack of faith. I always think I don't have the faith that I should have. That to me is what I need to bring out and say, and look at it and say, I need to work on this. I need to be able to share this with people so they can help me understand who I am. So anyway, it's just a wonderful book, and get out there and read it if you haven't read it already. I read it many, many years ago and lived most of it with her. So I've known Beth since she was a little girl.
Thanks, Beth.
So I may be a little impartial, just a little. Yes. But it is a wonderful book, Beth, and that is the truth. Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing.
Marty's got her hand up. Do you want to go ahead, Marty?
You're Marty?
You're good. Yeah, my Marty. You can need to unmute yourself then, Mart.
I have known Elizabeth longer than Pat has.
Yes, she has.
I have just started a journey of coming out. And I think I'm a retired pastor. I know that. But I think my bishop would be appalled if he knew that he triggered my start of my exploration. We were at a gathering several years ago where he was trying to explain the Methodist stance, and he is one of our conservative bishops. And I said, I rarely speak at conference gatherings, but this one I did. I said, sexuality is so fluid and so growing right now, and nobody really knows who they are anymore. I mean, I never even heard the word homosexual when I was a child. I'm 78 years old. And I have just begun to realize that I am bisexual.
Wow.
And it's liberating and it's wonderful. And I'm also in the middle of reading Richard Rohr's, I can't think of the name of the book right now, but Falling Upwards, something like that.
Yeah.
And the thought of this being part of my second half of life, being liberated like this, is really exciting.
Wow.
And I am so grateful to all of you who have done it before me and shown me the way. So thank you.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I'm super excited.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I would love to bring us to a close. I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I want to end with two quick readings. I'm going to ask Karen to read the last paragraph of her foreword, and then I'm going to read the last paragraph of the book. Both feel like blessings, and so these are the blessings that I'd like to leave you with.
May Elizabeth's story be an invitation to examine your own story, to see the ways God calls you to live more fully into who you were created to be, to explore the many pieces that create the whole of you. Your story has power. It holds knowledge and wisdom. Tell it often. Watch for the storylines that emerge. See how God keeps showing up. Keep alert for new lessons. Let it lead you home to yourself. Your story will heal you, heal others, and give hope to those who have still not learned the power of their own story.
Lay your story down. Lay your story down against the white margins of a page, or lay it with low tones into the listening ears of a friend, or lay it from the pulpit over the startled minds of the congregation. Lay your story down with your magnificent body when you pull your chilly skin between the covers at night. In prayer, lay your burning cry and moment of gravest fear, and the sweaty rhythm of sex, and your deep love of the landscape you walk on, lay them invisibly over the world. Spread your story on the upturned soil like handfuls of seeds, winter wheat sown to send nutrients into the earth. There is this soul we all share that needs to be fed. It's aching for your story, for its emotional truths and its flights of fancy, because you must love yourself with leaps and bounds in order to have the courage to tell it. And this is what it aches for most of all. So thanks again to Wisdom Ways, to Skinner House. I see Pierce is here, so thanks to Pierce, and to Danielle at Wisdom Ways. And then big thank you to you, Karen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. What a wonderful night.
Yeah, it's a real treat to be with you. And thanks to everyone for being here. So I wish you all well. Good night now.
Good night.